Me karakia tātou, whakatake te hau ki te uru, whakatake te hau ki te tonga, kia mākina kina kiuta, kia mā taratara ki tai, e hi ake ana te atākura, he tio, he huka, he hauhunga, haumie, hui, taiki. Tēnā koutou, kua huhu mai nei, ngā mihi ki ngā mana whenua, e te rangatira, Hannah, tēnā koe, e te rangatira Iru, tēnā koe, e ngā manuhiri, nau mai haere mai. Ko waio, ko ingarangi, ko kōtirana te whakapaparanga mai, engari ko tāmaki makaurau, te whenua tupu, kei o tautahi ahau i na hoana, he pau ahau i PGF Services, ko Abby Popham tōku noa. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. Kia ora koutou. The kaupapa that we will be working with today is focused on the Safer Gambling Aotearoa Community Grant Fund 2023. So hopefully that is something that everyone here wants to learn more about today. I am really looking forward to learning more about it because I will definitely be applying. We have Hannah Pike and Edu Loach from Te Whatu Ora, who will be sharing all of their wisdom and answering a lot of questions and things that we might be concerned about or want to know more information about before we start the process. So please feel free to speak up and ask questions throughout. They are really good at explaining things in a super simple and easy to understand way, so we're really grateful that they can be here today. Before we get started, we'd like to do just a little bit of whakawhanaungatanga so we can get to know who is in this space. So if you wouldn't mind, just in the chat typing your name, what service you're from and what region you're in. We would love to hear from you. This helps us as well as helping Hannah and Edu give a bit of guidance as to what will work best for us all today. So as we all do that, we'll see them popping up and I will hand over to Hannah and Edu. Thank you so much for being here.
Kia ora, thank you, Abby. Maybe Edu and I can briefly introduce ourselves before we get into our chitty-chattery about community grants. But thank you so much for having us. And it'll be really cool to speak to you all today. And it's nice to see some new faces and some not so new faces. But my name is Hannah. I am the Senior Advisor in our Minimising Gambling Harm program and the Health Promotion Directorate at Te Whatu Ora. So previously we were Te Herena Hauora, the Health Promotion Agency, but we got moved into the wider Te Whatu Ora with the health reform last year. But we still have quite a similar role. And I work alongside Edu and my colleague Connie, who is not able to make it today. But I will quickly pass over to Edu to introduce himself.
Thanks, Sam. E mihi atu ki a koe, Abby, he karakia mua tātou kua haere mai nei mo tēnei hui. Noi reira, he mihi atu. Ko ai au, ko Edu Loach, tōku ingoa, no Te Teko. It's a very tiny place in the Eastern Bay of Plenty. For those that have passed through it, you may have not even realised you've gone through our town. So it's that small. However, the love for the place is huge, and that's why so many of our whānau remain there. So rather than be drawn out and living in the wider context of what Aotearoa provides. So anyway, that's where I whakapapa to. So on my iwi, so I'm from Ngāti Awa, and our canoe is Mātātua. So it's a pleasure to be here, and I do see some familiar faces that made it to the hui yesterday. And for those that can't make it, ones that are here, obviously. So this is just informing around what our process this year looks like. It is a little bit, more enhanced, if you like, from what it was last year. And so we'd just like to talk to a little bit like that. For those, and I do see some familiar faces, there'll be a pop quiz initially to see what you remember from yesterday's, to see how we go and to see what you picked up and carried away as, oh, I better remember that. So nō reira, e mihi atu ki a koutou, and so yeah, and thank you for this opportunity from us both to speak on behalf of not only our part of Te Whatu Ora, but really around what's available for you as staff working in this space, and what we can do with our communities to really grow this kaupapa. So nō reira, tēnā tātou katoa.
Cool. I'm just going to start off by giving a little bit of context and explaining what we're going to do this year, and then we'll open it up to questions, but also if you have any papai throughout, feel free to jump in. It's super chill and we'll do our best to try and answer them. So for the Safer Gambling Aotearoa Community Grant Fund, it is a kind of historical grants project that we have done, and then previously Te Here Hawara has done, and it has historically been associated with GHOR, Gambling Harm Awareness Week, which has been kind of shortish grants, about 2 to 3K, just to help service providers with whatever initiatives or events they were doing throughout GHOR. Last year, we decided to do a little bit of a direction change and try promote service providers and communities to contribute and create some like more long-term sustainable initiatives that they could kind of carry throughout, not just a one-off event, but maybe throughout a year, and really responding to community needs, maybe thinking outside the box, looking at social determinants of health, all that good thinking. And with that, we introduced another pool, which had a greater amount of money that you could apply for, so it was between 5 and 10K. And from that, we saw really cool things happening, and we are really excited to do that again this year and have those 2 streams of pools available. And I'm just going to talk through a little bit about the criteria for those. So I'll just share my screen. Oh no, I can't share my screen. It says host disabled. Sorry, Abby. If not, I can just talk through it, and I can also share the slides afterwards.
I think I just made you co-host, hopefully.
Oh, cool. Well, 1 second. Cool. Can you see that okay? Perfect. So yes, the Safer Gambling Aotearoa Community Grant Fund is a grant that is open to minimising gambling harm service providers and community groups. And hopefully this year we are still working through a few internal hoops that we're trying to jump through to figure out exactly when this will be open. So we're just waiting for those to be confirmed in the next week or so. But we are expecting applications to be open for the grant in late May, early June. And regardless, all the applications will be open for 4 weeks. And throughout that period, and from now, essentially until when applications close, we will be available to support you throughout the process. So if you have any questions about what your event or your initiative might look like, we'll be here. We'll have something set up so that you can contact us easily. Just so, if you need any help or support with your writing or what you think might be a good event or initiative to apply for, we'll be able to help you through that. Also noting the election period this year. So the elections do pose some potential restraints as us, Te Whatu Ora. We cannot be associated, I guess, or fund something that is shown to have preference for a political party. So that means we cannot fund any events that do so. So that will be something that if it is a concern for you, whether you think your event might be politically influenced, then that's a good opportunity to come talk to us and we can see how it fits, because there are some like blurry lines around the elections and what we can and cannot do as public servants, as Te Whatu Ora, and that unfortunately means through this project that influences what we may be able to fund. Edu might talk to more about that later, as he's got that covered, but I'll just continue on. So just looking at what the different pools are, I briefly mentioned before that we had 2 pools last year, and then we'll do the 2 pools again this year. And for pool A, you'll see it is grants between 2 and 3K, and therefore one-off initiatives which may be linked to GHOR. They don't have to be linked to GHOR. But yes, just kind of one-off events that you could do throughout the year. And then for the Pool B streaming, it's for grants between 5 and 15K. So we've increased it 5K this year, and they are for more long-term, substantial, innovative initiatives. And just below in the table, I've just highlighted the criteria for those streams of funding, and this will all be available when we release the application as well. But just to give you some context while you might be thinking of things to apply for. So the first 5 criteria are the same for Pool A and Pool B, so that it somehow relates to minimising gambling harm. This might not be a direct link. It might be focusing more on like your social determinants of health or more well-being or hawara approaches. But just so there is some kind of link to how it looks at gambling harm minimisation. Something that supports your community and whānau, focusing on supporting a priority population group and leads from Te Ao Māori, Pacifica or Asian worldviews, and is a community-driven solution responding to a need in your community or whānau. And then you'll see for Pool B, there are 2 additional criteria for this pool of funding, and that is an initiative that goes beyond service delivery, so really highlighting preventative or well-being hawara approaches or the social determinants of health, and then also it's an innovative way to address minimising gambling harm. So we like to think of this pool as a way to kind of think outside the box, do something that you might not have had the opportunity to do. So that's a little bit about Pool A, Pool B, and I'll just flip back to, this slide to clarify about like what you can and cannot apply for. So as an organisation or like a service, you can apply for both streams of funding. So you could do a Pool A application and a Pool B application, but you cannot apply for 2 Pool A's and 1 or 2 Pool B's. So it's only 1 per pool and it's 1 application per initiative. And that is a little brief rundown. Do you have anything to add, Edu?
That was great, Hen. Yeah, thank you for that. So I know because we were asked yesterday at a different hui just around examples of what they could mean around the restrictions in relation to I guess the leading up into elections, and so one of those had been expressed out of would this be a potential opportunity for community funding from a staff member. So and ultimately we had to put it through our checks and balances, which we'll have to do with all applications that come through, all conversations leading up to, I guess, formal applications coming in from you or community groups. So if for example, there was, I guess, an initiative, for example, to get politicians and to bring minimising gambling harm to the table and so forth, that crossed that line a bit, and we wouldn't be able to provide funding to support that. I personally love the idea, but this year wouldn't be a time that we could do that because of this. I wasn't aware that this even existed because I'm reasonably new working as a public servant, as within a crown entity within the Health Promotion Directorate in Te Whatu Ora. But this has been around for some time. So as NGOs, some of you may not be aware that this even exists, but it does across all ministries. And so that's, some of you may see a little bit of difference around things that are in the media. So particularly where there are things that have been funded by services or Crown entities. So and that's because of this 3-month period leading right up to the election day. So I'm just giving you some heads up. This is something that we have to consider. However, that said, that doesn't mean you shouldn't propose some ideas. Give us a call. We can put it through our checks and balances around, yes, that could be done, or make some alterations to make sure that it can be something that does fit the criteria without that being a barrier. So still be open-minded around that. Don't think, oh, what's left? What can we do? Just think open-minded around what is possible, and we can talk through that and have some checks in place. So hopefully that helps out around that.
And just to quickly address your question or comments, Nick and Peti. Absolutely. I think what the priority populations are in our like grant criteria are reflective of the strategy. So we've kind of just like chucked that across. But I think it's worth being explicit that it's basically all minority populations and the intersections within those populations, and worth stating like people with disabilities, our rainbow, takatapu, and MVP there whānau as well. So I think we can add that, Edu? Yeah.
I'd be disappointed if we didn't include the opportunities for
Yeah.
our communities to be involved. So
yeah, just to make it super clear.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. Did anyone have any other tātai or comments or maybe thoughts or of initiatives they were thinking of? And also, if you don't have them now, it's so fine. We'll be very much in contact via our info@Gambling Aotearoa email address with some more details about the grants and more definitive dates and any documents that we have associated with it. So we'll definitely be in touch through that. And if you're not part of that emailing list, you can check your email in and I can add it to the list in the chat, sorry. Yes, but yeah, and all the information when the applications are live and prior to that will be on the Safer Gambling Aotearoa website, but that will all be linked in the email as well. Yes.
Awesome. Tēnā korua, tēnā tātou. So I've been engaged with a couple of community organisations in the Waikato region, Koshlas here, and the other rōpū aren't here, but just on their behalf, I'm just wondering whether an innovative idea might be, so Koshla is based in Rotorua and she manages a community garden and is linked into a collective of community gardens in Rotorua. So I've been wanting to encourage them to apply and linking in how we can, you know, work with whānau in the community to build food security, which hits on many social and economic determinants of health, but also, you know, whānau that are potentially gambling, and that's why they're unable to afford as much kai. So that's one initiative. I'm wondering if that's appealing to Te Whatu Ora. And then the other one is we were contacted by a business owner of a couple of barbershops in the Bay of Plenty area. And so she wants to have an event where she offers free haircuts to the community in exchange for engaging with them about gambling harm. So yeah, so those are a couple of ideas of, you know, people that are in the community that have access to the community who are impacted by gambling harm. So just really putting a feel out on their behalf as to whether those initiatives would be of interest to Te Whatu Ora. Kia ora.
I'll hand this over to Hannah to respond, and the reason why is I'm on the panel, so it's better that someone else talks to this. So there's no sort of indication that they're panel member. Didn't he say something to Peti about that? So I'll let Hannah answer this one.
Cool, thank you. Yes, so anything that sounds, both of those sound like really good initiatives that you could apply for. They seem to fit just by hearing like the criteria, and that criteria is what the evaluation panel will use to assess the application. And that they're so connected to the community, that very good sign. So I would have no initial red flags for me, that one. And Edu can say things. It's just anything he says is in indicative of what your application response will be.
That's true, to be honest. So
Yeah.
yeah, so we can definitely not green light. You're definitely going to get the money coming across, but
Yeah.
we can give an indication. So.
Yeah.
Koshla, do you have any other questions?
Well, I'm not sure I have questions, but I'm wondering if this is a time and place to just give a little bit more detail about what our project is.
Yeah, if you would like to share that, all good
We,
with me.
I'm kind of representing a collective of community marakai all around Rotorua, and we supporting each other more than in the past. Like we have regular whakamās around each of the gardens. We want to hold that collective space. I mean, a lot of people want to go in and put boxes in people's backyards and have an individual mentor, but we think the collective space is where the magic happens. And so we want to do more to look after those collective spaces as learning centres, and also to support more neighbourhood marakai, those community spaces, and then backyard marakai as well, so we can be a source of plants, food, and seeds and things for people to set up in their backyard. So we just see lots of possibilities there. And I worked as a problem gambling counsellor, I mean, quite a few years ago now, so I understand the issues, and it kind of makes sense to me that we develop these spaces where people can when they're in trouble, or can go when they want to grow some kai at home. Yeah, and kind of branch out into the neighbourhood backyard sites. Yeah, so I don't know. We also want to have regular wānanga, and that would require like ongoing funding every year. So I don't know whether you can support us to find sources of ongoing funding so that we can run 2 wānanga a year, for example, in spring and in autumn. So, you know, to teach people how to grow things from seed and how to grow kumara-tupu and all those sorts of things. So, you know, move everybody towards food security, growing their own in their backyard. So I don't know, there's a question in there somewhere.
Kia ora, thank you for sharing. That already sounds like it's picking a lot of those criteria. You know, learning centres and community spaces are obviously really important ways for people to connect with each other in our communities, to be resilient. So that seems like it would fit in with a lot of those criteria. I think another thing to note is like you guys, the communities, and you're working directly with your people, you know the best ways to support them. Like I am a degree of separation away, and so we're trying to have a lot of trust in what you guys know and what you want to do for your communities. So if that is something that you can write down that is good for your community, then that is good for your community, and whatever good looks like for you. But looking at the criteria is a way we can, I guess, be accountable for the funding. So it sounds really awesome. And in regards to ongoing funding, the grant fund that we do is pretty annual. We can never guarantee that it's going to happen every year. We still have to do our own internal like pitching of let's do this project. But that you could apply for a similar thing in the next year of funding, and it could be like an ongoing, I guess, or like a subset of this initial project that you would be setting up. I think we have been having some kind of wider conversations around like that ongoing and sustainable funding is needed across lots of things. So we would, I think, love to try work towards that, but that's where we are at the moment. So yes, hopefully that validates you a little bit, but it sounds really awesome and excited to read your application or give you any other support in the next couple months beforehand. Anything to add, Edu? Sorry.
Yeah, look, that sounds amazing, and I'll talk about something, but see if you can find how it aligns with what you and your community are thinking of doing. So my wife, she works in the healthy active living for what was formerly Sport Southland, now it's Active Southland, and so some of the work that they're doing is working with not only the primary school around the curriculum, around the phys ed curriculum, on how to get children within primary schools more active, because that's a significant space affecting their own well-being and hauora. So how they also work is work with communities, and also to some extent community leaders, whether that be runanga or hapu, iwi at some levels, around finding people that who really understand what's going on in relation to trying to get their own children and tamariki mokopuna more active as well. So it's finding those key people in significant positions where they can influence what they're trying to do within schools. And they also work within the schools with with teachers and principals and boards to implement that. So where I'm trying to go with how that aligns is really look broader to find who shares the same values and the historical nature of learning that you talked about, and then being able to pull in those people early on in the piece, let them share the journey and influence wherever possible, and what that means, which is how my wife and how that kaupapa works throughout the country for healthy active learning. So if you can pull a few nuggets out of that and what that means around the sustainability of it, I love it. I love that. I've talked to others about potentially in the future being able to live off the grid, and what that means in a way that we used to way back in the day, where most of my whānau, extended whānau, had very little, very, very little, but there was always enough. It was either grown out back or whatnot, or within the village itself, we shared things. So anyway, that's a little bit of a side thing, but if you can find some alignment in what that means. So hopefully that didn't sort of step over the line as someone on the panel, but just there's some other things that you might be able to find some nuggets from.
Oh, tēnā korua. Thank you both for your feedback.
It looks like there's a lot of thinking going on. Oh, what does it mean for our community? What does it mean for us? So, which is a great thing. So, I mean, we're really excited about this opportunity. We, as was mentioned, we have increased the amount of funding, and because we know that this is of value. Been in the sector for a number of years, and how small the amount of funding was. We used to apply for every single cent that we could because we have so little, and we knew and we know now that actually we always had to increase that and how we can support our communities. So certainly from our approach, we want to continue to be able to provide that support as much and as often as we can, and show actually our communities and our services do some amazing work, and what that can mean as we keep pushing forward in these very challenging times. And we have to take those things into account, that to a greater or lesser degree is influencing some of the things that people do to fill that void or whatever's going on in their lives. So I just wanted to just acknowledge you all in that space as well. So anyway, Nita, always good to see you.
Kia ora everyone. I'm Nita from PGS Services. I think my biggest concern is the timeline, the period when you tell us that it's open for application and how long it'll take, and then the decision process. Only because of the basis that when you're working with the community and you're encouraging them to seek funding from any source, that you've got to go through a process, and when the decision is made and it doesn't come out like they want it to come out, like they might not get the funding, then it sets a whole new different process of how to cope with the consequences of that. So I'm really interested in trying to get that timeline down to a minimum where it doesn't impact on the community, if you know what I mean, especially if they don't get the funding, or their project doesn't quite cut it. So that's just something that I'm raising. I'd like to see that happen sooner rather than later.
Yeah. And that's a really good point, Nita. And we've always been mindful about, what that could mean. And I know with the number of applications, like for last year, for example, we had, quite a number of applications, and there was a very, very small number that we just couldn't, because of the nature of what it was. What we try and do is ensure that the total amount of funding is obviously we're going to use the whole lot. And what it means is, in the perfect world, that yes, we would be able to give out the maximum to something that really jumps out. But what we don't want to do is turn people away completely. We'd rather provide some funding regardless of that. It may be a smaller amount, and that may mean a smaller amount for some of the bigger requests for funding as well. But we would rather that everyone got funding if they fit the criteria, rather than no. Timings wise, it is a challenge. We do have a procurement or documentation process that we have to go through, but we are trying to streamline that as much as possible. And I know one of this is an internal thing, but some of the challenges that we have is that we try and get this information out in advance of the 1st of July, which is the next financial year for us. And that takes, that takes a bit of work to actually get money in advance of, or approval to advertise that this money is going to be available in the next financial year. So we've worked through that. We've got sign off and approval to do that. But these are things that we know are paramount for not only yourselves as services, but also for our communities, because we know that this time frame between the 1st of July and the first week of September is a very tight time frame. So we're just trying to pull that in sooner as much as we can. But we're hearing what you say, Nita, and I know if at all possible, if we can pull that in earlier in the year, we'll try and reflect that as we keep pressing on, each year to simplify the process, not only for services, but for our communities as well. So hopefully that answers your question.
Thank you, Nita. I was wondering if you had any specific recommendations for a timeline that would kind of fit that problem, or is it just kind of, just so we can see what, how we can improve our processes and reflect on ourselves?
I'm not questioning the process. I'm just questioning the timeline. It's quite tight.
Yeah. Okay.
But I mean, ideally, you want to know by July that you've got the funding, because it's not just the organisation or the community. If you're doing projects, it's about the other vendors that you might be involved with. So the money might not necessarily be directly involved in paying for your service. It could be that you're facilitating other services to come in and do potentially some of the work within whatever project it is. So it's always good to know that by July, that's 2 months before your date in September, that you can actually say, I've got money there that I can pay for this person. And if they're not available, then who else can I get in? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So it's knowing that you've got the money in hand, and then whoever the community. So my preference is to support community activations around a project. But in doing so, that doesn't necessarily mean that they've got the skills or the resources to understand how to make that happen. I'm kind of there to support them. So when you're supporting, sometimes it feels like you're pushing, and you're pushing them out of their comfort zone because they've not got the capacity, because this is could be all new for them. And it's about giving them the power to empower them around the decision process, around the passion that they have, that it's okay to pay $2,000 for a venue, you know, when you've got a $10,000, all of those kind of conversations, because they've always worked with the minimum and they've made the minimum work for themselves. But when you apply for funding and you get the 10 or the 15,000, you're suddenly faced with the fact that I've now got to pay $2,000 for a venue, and you know, it's all of that conversation. So it's really, I'm just concerned about the timeline is all, you know.
Yeah.
Put the application in, get the decision, and then work as much as you can to support your community or the organisation within that community to get their stuff together to be able to deliver in the week of Jiho. Can I just ask, Jiho is not just for the first week, eh? You're okay about some of the dates being outside of the first week of September?
Look, a great part-time Nita, Jiho is every day. So, so you know, the community funding and so forth, which was part of the move to be able to have funding, not just for Jiho itself, but throughout the financial year. So, and we know that, you know, there is the opportunity for, because it is a focus week, and media often get on top of it, so they use that as a particular good time to be able to either do events or launch something, whatever it may look like. But that's not necessarily how it may work for our communities to work in that space, let alone other key sort of partners or stakeholders or venues or whatever's required for that. So, but yeah, look, Jiho is, you know, we work in that space every day. And it's really about what works best for everyone involved. So, but yeah, great question. But as long as it's completed and we get some, you know, what it looks like from a feedback perspective around how it all went before the end of the you know, the financial year, which is the end of June next year. So, but all those dates will be, you know, the timings to get back to us and how that's done. They'll be in the documentation sent out to everyone. So, yeah, great question.
I think I remember last year, your team was available to support organisations or applicants one-on-one with the process. Is that still going to be available this year?
Yes, yeah, definitely. And we'll basically be opening that up now, unofficially, but officially in a couple of weeks when we get out the official timelines. But yeah, when we really encourage you to use those, because it means that we can kind of suss out any tight points or just anything in your application that you have questions about before it gets submitted. So just so it can be, I guess, or reflect the criteria as best it can. But yes, they will be available.
Yeah, thanks, Anne. And some of that move too is that when we're talking to, you know, some of our services who have put in applications, you know, around the application, what was on paper is one thing, but when they're talking to it, it's like it's a whole nother level. I mean, they know what they want to do. It just wasn't expressed on paper. And so, yeah, so in relation to that was why we really want to have the conversations to make it really clear for the other panel members around what it looks like, and that we can have conversation around that. So, so we're not at all suggesting that, you know, every application has to be this high level of this, and this. But as long as there's a clear understanding around, you know, why their community or why this or why the rationale's there and what they hope to achieve, but it's a little bit more visible for you know, all of the panel members. So I know that the process isn't easy for many people to fill out those sort of applications, particularly where there's funding attached, and there may be a little bit of anxiety or angst around it. But we want to simplify that as much as possible. We don't expect the be-all high-end applications that, you know, some people put through for this, that, or the other. But we do want to capture the essence of it. And I think that's what will really sell it for the panel, as to, why are they doing it, and what it's going to look like, and what value is it going to bring, and what does it mean for our communities and those people that are gambling in a way that's harmful. No, as Whai Paula Snowden used to say, I think it's 8 or 9 seconds, right? It's done, we move on. So anyway, I shouldn't joke about Whai Paula. So she's doing some amazing work, and for those that don't know, she's put her hand up within her role as the regional director for the Central, and to pick up the kaupapa around if minimising gambling harm is brought to the table, would anyone pick it up? And she put her hand up for it. So so I just wanted to acknowledge Paula for what she's brought, and what she's bringing and continuing to support with in her capacity in that role for Te Whatu Ora. All right, there you go. Is there any last questions? There's another 9-second window there. Look, it must be lunchtime, eh? There you go. Right. Thanks, everyone. I'll hand it back over to Hannah. Have you got anything to tail off with?
No, just thank you for your time and thank you for your questions. And I've just chucked Eru and myself the email in the chat. If you have any questions in the next couple of weeks while we get that information out to everyone, please feel free to get in touch. But otherwise, yeah, thank you for your time. And thank you, Abby and PGF, for setting this up. Pass back to Abby to close.
Thank you both. Yeah, big acknowledgements to you both for sharing your time and all of this information with us today. It has been really helpful for me, and I've been noting things down as I have seen many others doing the same. So thank you all for being here. Thank you for your commitment to this mahi. It is a big job that we're all doing, and it's great to see people from outside the sector really interested in this work too. Thank you so much. And yeah, we're all really excited for this. And thank you, Te Whatu Ora, for the opportunity and your flexibility and adaptability. We saw that last year and look forward to seeing it again this year. So really appreciate that from you. In terms of ways to contact you, if there's anything that you'd like me to send out to the people who registered for this free, when I send out the recording, just let me know. I'm happy to put your email addresses or just the general info at Safer Gambling Aotearoa, whatever works. And yeah, you'll hear from me soon, everyone who is here today. Thank you for registering. This is also our monthly wānanga. We have a different topic each month, aiming to provide professional development for the public health and clinical sector, mainly focusing on reducing gambling harm, but we know that that is just a piece of the puzzle for so many of our whānau, so we try to have a range of topics. We've talked about positive ways of engaging with rainbow communities. We've talked about older adults and their vulnerability to gambling harm. So if that is of interest, you're welcome to stay up to date with that through our email list or through our website. There is a link through to Shining the Light on Gambling Harm, which is this wānanga here. So yeah, thank you all so much for being here today. And I will now, unless anyone has anything else they'd like to say, I will close us with a kakia. And you're welcome for finishing a little bit early. Thank you, Hannah and Eru, a little bit longer for lunch, hopefully, for all of us. Me karakia tātou. Kia whakaaria te tapu, kia wātea ai te ara, kia turuki whakataka ai, kia turuki whakataka ai, haumi hui karakia.